record the meeting for Dan and other folks who cannot make it. But welcome everybody. Good morning. And what we're going to talk about today is have a discussion, and I'm not going to talk for very long, I promise. I'll do my best not to talk for very long. I'm going to share my screen. Scott, you'll help me with the right.
Yeah.
So what we've discussed is that as we're moving forward, we would move to work, the project team would work individually with utilities that would actually select some processes and want to improve them. And what we would provide is support and some tools and improve the tools and with the methodology and stuff like that. So there are two worksheets here. These are the utility partners that we have today. I think that's all of it, 18. We have a couple who may be joining us soon. So the Kansas City selected water main replacement, as-built, submittal, and approval process. That is the specific part of the CIP overall process that they are going to focus on. And DC Water is doing business case evaluation for CIP. So as far as assessments, this is a tab for assessments. We have assessments in place for the people tier 1. For the people, tier 1 would be to identify where the problem areas may be, and then tier 2, what can we do about it? What I'm going to show today is those tools. Tier 1 has been completed. It's in Microsoft Forms, and we've talked about that. I'm not going to repeat. Tier 2, we also have the questions. It's just a matter of the mechanics, and the forms are already in place. So that's all pretty much ready to go as beta versions. What I'm going to share with you today is we also have assessment for process and technology, which we didn't have when we were starting this project, because this comes out of a different research foundation project 5039 on intelligent water systems and digital intelligent water systems and smart utility. So we put that together for this type of assessment. And then we're also working on the change management. And the idea was that here we would just say the dates when you would start, complete. So they have a map who's doing what and who, where we are overall. So that's sort of for the assessment size. And then everybody knows that after the assessments, we have the developing the business process models for as is, for the to be, plan the improvement, and then start and then prepare a case study. So that is kind of the framework that we've been talking about. And this is the current version of this tool that we would use for these assessments. And I'll explain how this works. And I'll explain this map, and then I'll stop for questions before I go into details. So it means that people would do some preliminary planning. They would select the business process, identify the stakeholders, assess the characteristics. These orange ones are the assessments. So I'll explain how this spreadsheet current version works right now. It basically focuses on this part, assessing the characteristics of the business process and the technology, because they're kind of into a single tool because they're so connected. So I'm going to just stop right now and see if there are any questions or if there are any clarifications that are required. I'm going to give people time to.
Good explanation, Cello. Maybe they just get it.
Well, it took me a long time to get it, so I thought maybe, they're apparently much faster, much quicker than me. So okay, so that's kind of the framework of how we go about it. And I'll show just on an example of the pieces that are currently included, which is this characteristics of the business process and the technology aspect. So if I click on the characteristics of the business process, this is the menu that I get. Let me just, so there are different parts of it, as we've discussed many times. What is the scope? What is the impact? How much do we have documentation? The business process goals, have we defined why we're doing this? And how we're doing business process management. So the way this would work is if you would go to like business process scope, it would ask you, okay, how many people are involved in here? Are there, you're not sure, which is a problem, or many business units across the organization, or 4 or more, just getting how many people are involved in this, which is just one way to see whether it's just how much of a need for integration is going to be required. How many different, I'll get to data later. So if, for example, it's all about just members within a single small business unit team that are doing this, our risk may not be that large. So we just select these options, and then we can look at the impact, and we can try to estimate. And these things are not surveys. This is a template for a workshop where people would discuss and say, what is the impact on levels of service? I don't know, or it's a major impact. And essentially, we would provide also guidelines of how to structure this meeting, how to conduct it, what are the roles, like facilitator and so forth, so that people would say, well, this impacts regulatory compliance, some impact, it's some impact, or it's like major impact and stuff like that. So I want to clicking on the wrong arrow. So are there any questions here as I move through? Are you okay with this? So the next, yes.
So
thank you.
Do you have a definition for, what some of these would mean? Like what would be major versus minor?
That's correct. What I'm planning is to have documents that would provide this documentation, not to overload the spreadsheet, but something like a handout that you would use. So for example, that would provide the definition and the terms and how to do that, so that it's in a workshop one could have this handout. So for example, if you look at this activity, document as is business process in a model, if I click on that, it's going to bring up the business process modeling guidelines that we have developed previously. So the idea is to include links to documentation that would, and this is a document that explains how to do modeling. It says draft, but it was actually part of the final report, and what it looks like, and some examples, and go through that. So the idea is that we would, along this upper line, provide such documentation. And when you go to, let's say, where did I go? The business process. I went here. That we would also provide such documentation and help along links as well, because these links just take you to the part of the questions of the assessment. So for example, if I click on business process documentation, it will say, okay, what is included in the doc? What do you know about this process right now? Do you know what the activities and workflows are? What data is required to support? So again, this would be a workshop setting. So one of these, so this would be a guideline, but in the future, what the intention is to also provide a link to a written guideline that describes this is a working session that includes subject matter expert and a facilitator, and this is how you'd go about it. So that's the idea, but we didn't want to put everything in the spreadsheet, but just provide links to the documents that describe these steps. Does that answer your question, V?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I think that extra sheet will help, especially when facilitating and trying to make sure everyone has the same understanding when they're answering the questions.
Absolutely, yeah. And the idea was that the effort as it morphs into people more doing actual improvements, then the role of the project team would be to really kind of help out with these types of things. So if for example, the guidelines that we provide initially are not clear, we would work together how to refine them. And as people have lessons learned, we would include to update these documents, but it would live online, these guidelines. And the like, for example, this guideline for business process modeling is in our OneDrive. So we would put the other documents there as well. Does that answer properly or no?
It does, yeah, thank you.
Okay, good, thank you. So let me just make this little window a little smaller. So then there are aspects of technology. So for example, the first set of questions are on data. Okay, the link is not working. Let me see. It is about what is the required data. And this is what people would just type in. So they would say, well, for this process, what do I need? Real-time operational data. Well, where is it? Is it it's in the SCADA system. So you would type this in rather than have a drop-down menu because there are just too many options. So then this list of data, that what categories of data that you would need, will then carry over to other questions related to data and systems, such as, for example, so these are then copied, A and B are, linked. And then you would say, well, who's responsible? Which business is responsible for the collection of data and which business units supports the system or document? So you would start generating a map to know more about this process. Scott, okay. So, and then when it comes to documentation, so this, again, the first part carries, like, how well is this documented? Well, it's partially documented in SOPs. It's mostly documented. How important is the data? Is it really critically important or sort of important or kind of nice to have? And just to not belabor the point too much, there's issues about how is the data collected? Is it entered manually into files? Is it extracted automatically from other systems or databases? Is it adequate or not adequate? Is the data, how is it stored? Is it in a data mart? Is it in a software application? And that's really, once you define what data and what systems, these should not be difficult to answer, especially if you have IT in the room when you discuss it. And then how is the data, whether data is complete in terms of records and attributes? How is the data organized? Are the names and tags consistent? Is the hierarchy and taxonomy in other systems, are they unique for this system or database, or are they or are they consistent across all systems and databases? And you know that if your naming convention or hierarchy is different in your SCADA system and your maintenance management system and your CAD drawings, that creates major problems. So these are templates to be used in workshops. And then there's a template for the analytics. And this all came from a different research projects that was then adopted and adapted. And what we would end up once we do that is basically a dashboard that shows these are all the different questions. I can zoom in, and then what answers you made, they're kind of mapped into here. And you start, and you also have the dashboard for the business process is on the lower part, and the technology is on the upper part. So the idea is, like we're in active discussions, project team with Dan Ott in Kansas City, that we would help them to, adapt this tool, use this tool, set it up for them. If they would like to change it, we would change it and stuff like that. But we would start getting a picture of what is it that we're dealing is. And then the next step that we're working on right now is, once you collect this data, what kind of things, what kind of patterns you are detecting, and then identifying risk. So for example, if you don't have documented processes and it's critically important, then you don't have the data. If you remember that maturity figure that I showed in PowerPoint presentations previously, these pieces of data would then inform us to construct an overall assessment of our capabilities and exposures to risk. So I'm going to just stop now and see if there are any questions before we proceed.
Oh.
Okay, that's not a good sign. I'm going to have to start calling on people to provide input. Are there any thoughts that people have or questions? Again, we were keen to set up individual calls with utilities to go through this in detail, discuss with each utility and the team that would go about it, and what their basic task would be to select the business process and identify the stakeholders, just that we can then map which kind of when do they want to do the assessments. And these are not going to take a long time, but it's kind of due diligence before we get into, purchasing shiny objects and stuff like that.
There's not a lot of participation, and you're going to need to call on people, I think, but keep in mind that what we're doing here, and Jenny smiled, so I'm sure she has something to say, but what we're doing is back to the methodology of assessing where we're at and identifying through analysis where the areas are that need to be addressed, and then identify improvements that can be implemented in the utility. So, and this particular spreadsheet identifies particular business process areas so far that individual utilities have identified that they want to pursue and to do this work under a pilot. So we're looking for others to step up and identify a specific problem area, work process that they want to engage in, with the idea that they would apply, these tools. And also the people tool is there as well, which we've been through previously. So we've got people, process, technology, and we're not aware of any place in the industry where this is pulled together like this. So hopefully this can be of use to people. Comments?
I was just
Go
gonna
ahead,
say,
Jenny. Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is great and a really robust tool. I think, where Tacoma Water sits is we need to pick a business process. And so I think it's harder to vision what the questions might be until you have that particular process to apply it to.
Sure.
You mentioned, not taking too much time with the analysis, and I completely agree. I wonder if you have any recommendations for how much time you anticipate this to take, and maybe, 1 2-hour meeting, 2 2-hour meetings, because I know for our team, getting the time and investment from our team, I think having that expectation up front would help kind of shape how we are able to really dig into the tool.
That's really a great question. And one of the things that makes it a little bit more difficult is that if you look at this list, you see that Baltimore selected procurement process. That's very different than what Great Lakes selected managing gas cylinders, which is a lot tighter, a lot smaller, a lot more. So the level of effort involved in actually gathering because it's really information gathering stage up front is going to vary depending on what people pick. So for example, when it comes to Baltimore, I'm going to have a conversation with them and say, listen, maybe you want to take a part of the procurement process, not like the whole thing, because it'll be overwhelming. And I also think that the first time that the team goes around this, it will be different amount of time spent on these meetings than the second time, because I think the first time there'll be a little bit about learning about the tool, working out, but it's just like business process models. The first one takes a lot more time to develop than the second time. The second time you do it because you're familiar with the language, with the process and all that. So it's an excellent question, and I don't have a clear answer, but I think that when we go through these earlier stages and we, look at the business process and we see that it's, has a huge impact. We have no documentation. We haven't defined the business goals. Where we don't have any metrics. All of a sudden, the meetings may not proceed before at least addressing some of these issues. So it's a little bit more difficult. So just going through the sprint. Yes, Scott.
Well, I was just going to add, and this is great, that you on the previous slide where you had that preliminary planning, there's probably a step where the project team gets together with you and really scopes out what a process, an internal process might look like, so that you could basically, when you convene people together, then you can have a system and a plan for how you would approach that, so that people get a feeling for what it is that we're talking about. It could be a number of workshops that are held. I mean, you could have one that would be a 2-hour session, let's say, on business process, and a 2-hour session on technology. And it's even possible to do that with the people side in terms of the survey. But overall, they're going to say, well, where is this going? And you'd have to get into this kind of graphic here to say, here's what we're trying to achieve, here's where we're going to wind up, and go through that, Jenny.
So could I phrase it another way? Maybe, is there any goal or hope that the WISE team has about when each utility partner could report back? So maybe it's 5 meetings for Tacoma Water, but only 2 for San Francisco, but we're reporting back in June. So what?
Well, our goal would be to meet with individual utilities to try to help select the right process. And then everyone on this project has day jobs with all sorts of responsibilities and stuff. So we can't tell demand, but and impose deadlines. But I think we can help them through it and that these tools, as they evolve, can help them better and better. And so I would very much hope if within like the 3 months, 2 or 3 months period, most of the people would at least go through these steps. And I see that Jessica Tazara has her hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, I know I haven't been super involved lately, so hopefully I'm not asking silly questions. But one of the, I guess, things I'm wondering as I'm looking at this is kind of your vision on the amount of involvement that you, from a WISE perspective, would be in this process. Like, are you thinking you work with the utility to kind of go through at a high level how the tool works and then sort of turn it over to us to kind of work through this on the side and then report back? Or are you wanting to be involved with, every single meeting that goes into this, which could be a lot?
Yeah, we would not be able, with 18 utilities on board, to actually manage this. And we would really, and we think that there's a great value in internal people really getting up to speed on these things. So if it takes a little bit longer, that's okay. But if internal people go through the process of, with support from the project team, to actually conduct this, and they also may learn some lessons and inform us if we get feedback from 10 different places, and somebody wants more salt, somebody wants more pepper, somebody wants more sugar, then we can kind of get it dialed in so it's more robust, and grow this tool as we go forward, and also include links to examples and artifacts and stuff like that. So the internal team would conduct a lot of these sessions either on their own, or it's totally okay if they want to hire, if you have a consultant that you really like, you can bring them in and help you facilitate this. This is all good. Whatever works best for each utility, and the need for every utility could be vastly different. And the kind of people, it could be different from one to another.
Hello, I would just add, Jessica, I think that you said, is it either this or that? I think your first comment was the right one. But on timing, in a perfect world, everyone would identify this. They'd go through that entire process within, let's say, a few months. They could document a case study, and that would be it. But earlier we had done a survey and said, who's interested in doing this? And we were getting some feedback, in another group, for example, that we're interested in doing it, but we might want to wait a couple months before we do it. And some others were saying, yeah, we're good to go. And we do have some that are good to go, even if it's spending more time up in the preliminary planning area, first. And that might, sometimes getting things organized is the hardest part. So, the timing is up to you. And then I think the idea would be that this group, while it's each individual utility is working together, we'd have the opportunity for those that are proceeding ahead, for those to share with the larger group of how is it going, what are some lessons learned, what are some suggestions they might give to others, those kind of things as well.
So kind of a couple goals, one being, to collect some case studies and have people go through it, but another being to collect any input to make, final tweaks on the tool in general before it's finalized. Okay. That
yes. Thank you for the question. And V has a question. Would this process work for asset management evaluation too, or is it specific for capital planning? It's totally not specific. The idea is that this would really be, it doesn't really matter. And if you can see the processes that they have actually selected, it really varies. It just happens that the first 3 are focused on CIP, but you know, Portland BES wants to do condition assessment of pumps and motors, and that's really good because it's not like system-wide. I mean, you know, it doesn't involve a huge amount of people, but it also provides value to the CIP program. It provides value to the asset management side of things. So that is kind of in my kind of the Goldilocks kind of process, or even managing gas cylinders, which is the first thing they're going to try, and they have impact on safety, and so I think it's a.
This is a composite list
sorry to
that's
interrupt,
being
Cello.
assembled across all the teams.
Just a
So-
second, Scott. Brian was just a Brian
Yeah,
was.
sorry,
sorry, I
Brian.
probably should have raised my hand, but I did want to just address, I mean, for V, we will be meeting with Cello internally. A
Yes.
group of us, you'll be in that meeting.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's actually been scheduled, Cello. I'm not your
I
side.
provided information to Cora, so she has
Okay.
access to your calendars. I'm sure she'll,
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, and
fine.
V, you're included in the group, so you'll be part of that meeting where we intend to select a process to assess. And most of the folks invited to that are not necessarily part, as you know, part of the capital planning. It spans everywhere from, well, every facet of our organization, really. So, and we're hoping to get guidance from Cello on selecting a process or processes that will be efficient, you know, that'll work, that we take baby steps, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the goal is really to address something that we can have a practical solution to a real issue that's not too huge. So in principle, it would work for different subsets of asset management, but asset management is such a huge animal, so many, you know, it's all over the place, that I think it would be prudent. And I think that if a utility does what we would call a vertical prototype, you mean you take a small footprint, but you do all the parts, then scaling it to other things, it's going to be so much easier. And then you would have people internally who have gone through it. And it was similar with business process modeling. The first time people do it, it's really a bit of a challenge. But then the second time, less so. And then when these skills are built up, all of a sudden, it's really, you know, they're cooking with gas. Actually, in California, you can't cook with gas much longer. I should eliminate this expression. But things keep going, you know, in a natural momentum. And it's also really important to adjust the tempo of this with the heartbeat of and the interest of the organization. And you know, in Detroit, they have 3 of them who are black belt, Six Sigma, worked in private industry doing all this. Well, maybe another utility has a different kind of internal capability. So it's all kind of, it's not one size fits all. Any other questions? So the idea is, we've sent emails, I think, to most folks asking for time to meet, and the next few months we envision will be kind of ground game, and you know, executing these steps. And if we can build as part of these not one-on-one, individual meetings, we would try to figure out the schedule. And you may not want to do all of these things. Maybe you don't want to tackle the people aspect of it this time. Maybe not. Maybe you just want to look at the business process and technology for now and work this here, and delay the people side for later. We have some things brewing on the asset management, on the change management stuff. So it's really whatever is most appropriate for you, but you don't have to do all of these, and you certainly wouldn't have to do all of these at once, but just to adjust to the rhythm. Deb, you've been thinking about it. Do you have any comments or thoughts that you'd like to share? You're on mute. I'm not sure if you're responding. Okay.
I'm having some audio difficulties. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you, yes.
Well, I've been talking to Scott about some possibilities, and I think that I think you're going to be looking at some dates that we can talk. So
Mhm.
I can see value. I want to be able to try it out on something in our EAM um, um, process, and it's just a matter of, I think, having the conversation with you and Scott to determine if we can move forward with it.
Great, great. And there are some things that people are really interested in that they have mentioned. One of them is enterprise risk management and going back and reusing the things that we've done in the last part of UAM to create dashboards for executive management that show where the risks are. There has also been talk about looking at development of digital asset management plans. So there are other things that people find interesting, but the key is, I think, not to pick something that's so big that will be overwhelming, but not so simple that's like calibrating a flow meter, which, you know, two people in the organization do. So just finding the right kind of thing that is a good part of overall success, I think. Scott, any thoughts from you?
No, I think you've summarized it real well. We want to tailor it. And that was a comment that Jenny made last time or the time before, is that, every utility is different. And, we want to have the conversation with the utility to, really make sure that it's set up for your success.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just see, is there somebody here that has not received yet a note from me nudging them and urging them to talk? If so, please let me know, because I think I sent it. I think we sent it to everyone, but maybe not. So let us know, and we'll keep working on this tool. We'll be developing the structure. They're not in Kansas City. They are very keen to use the people, all of these three, the business process technology and workforce and organizational culture. They want to do all three and integrate it on that process that they've selected. Change management is not quite ready for prime time yet, but we're working on it. We've got the questions. It's just the tools are not quite in place. And we're also going to be working on tools that say, after you conduct these assessments, what can you conclude? And what do all these results mean, and how can they be useful? So that's where we are, Scott.
So the tools and the methodology are there, but in the end, when you go through this analysis and you saw those different colors and graphics on, how you kind of stack up in these different areas, it gives you information there. It gives you information to use and to have a workshop and say, what should we do with this information? We're not prescribing to you, here's exactly what you should do, because every place is different. But the idea is that there's a lot of good information, and you don't have to pick everything, that's, pink or red necessarily, but put together, what improvements are that you want to address, when you want to address them, what your action steps would be, and so forth. And, Cello's developing some additional material that's going to help you, in templates that'll help you through that process. But we're not getting prescriptive in terms of what we think you ought to do with the information, specifically, but there would be some guidance in terms of how to conduct your process.
I hate this. There are 2+ commands on the bottom of Excel. One is to create a new worksheet. The other one is to zoom in. I keep pressing on the wrong plus. I wanted to give you a little bit more detail. Okay, I'm on the calculation page. Sorry about that. So if, for example, you see the data is like not that you need maintenance data, but it's not terribly important. It'll be different to look at the rest of these things than if like operational data is critically important. And here you can say from the previous census, what are all the data sources and data categories that you need? So if you have, 10 of these things, you'll see visually what the complexity of the problem, especially if, for example, where the vulnerabilities are. So then you can construct a strategy that makes sense. And if you're not sure about something, then you say, well, maybe we should find out. For example, in answers on one of these questions. So that's sort of the idea, but it looks more complicated than it really is. It's just a few workshops to kind of discuss, because you have internally people who know this stuff. It's just to ask them the right questions and get the answers, and then get people around the table. So.
Hey, Scott, this is Deb Rose.
Yeah.
Is it best just to wait, or do you want me to describe what I was thinking?
Well,
Best
you
way?
could, yeah. I mean, I think that we're going to have an individual conversation with you, but just for the good of, you could give a quick summary of what you're looking at, which is a fairly narrow type of issue that you're trying to solve, right?
Right. I didn't know if that would be helpful, Cello, if I just described what I
Sure.
was thinking.
Sure.
So I've already had the conversation with Scott, and it's around here at the council. We're going to be the first thing we're going to do and to get to replacing our CMMS, but it's going to be council-wide now, not just focused on environmental services. We're hiring an owner agent who's going to help us with all the aspects of getting prepared and looking at what we need to do and how we need to do it, and all the way through implementation. But the thing is that we're not actually prepared for this person. So my thought was for us to take our stakeholders group, which isn't too big, it's probably about a dozen people, and have them go through at least and we have to talk about this, one part of the assessment, and to determine how ready are we, what do we know, what don't we know, and in order to prepare ourselves and to create a business process for interacting with this owner agent. So a very small piece of the pie for right now, but it's a preparation piece that's really important.
Thank you. Duncan, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the first piece of this obviously is to the preliminary and identify the team. But also, I think maybe Scott and Cheryl, I think you guys, we need to be talking about communicating with the stakeholders, whereby, in these processes, there's more than one team. And I was thinking it's important to have a way for the other teams or the other stakeholders to know the benefit of these business processes. So even maybe before you select the process, is somehow to think how you communicate. Because what I have noticed as you go through the process, like DC Water, we are a little bit ahead. But as you go through the process, you're going to lose some people. And it's always good to have a way to keep the stakeholders engaged from the beginning. So as you select the process, just keep in mind that communication is very important. You don't want to be when you have already, you are trying to pick a pilot of what to do and you are by yourself. So throughout the whole process, the benefit, point. The engagement, to get others involved, I think is very important, and that should start as you are selecting the process.
Yes. But Duncan, we had that preliminary planning phase, and that could include a lot of different things, and that could be one of them. Real good point. I mean, that's because what we've learned in other teams is that
Yes.
engagement is really important. And if you don't have that engagement and continual engagement and communication and buy-in so that everybody owns it, it's not just Duncan who's doing this, right?
Yes.
That it's really the organization or the part of the organization really owns it and is behind it. You know, it's not going to be successful unless you have that engagement.
That's all.
And
That's all I had.
yeah, no, that's good. That's great. And Deb mentioned that they're going to hire an owner agent. Well, I've been in that role before, and the first thing an owner agent does is goes around and asks a lot of questions of the people in-house. And this is at least some structure with questions that we can all debate and provide a structure that is kind of consistent and that provides a type of information. But without the knowledge of internally what is necessary, what is a priority, what is the current situation, it's really difficult to have improvement efforts that are holistic and make sense. And yes, this due diligence, this work on due diligence before launching into actually buying pieces of software and buying technologies and things like that, if they're done later, it's a lot more expensive to fix. It's a lot more difficult to fix these things than it is to figure them out ahead of time. And it's not as scary as it looks. I know it looks like a lot of boxes, but it's really not not outrageous. So I'm curious, V, you probably have experience with these types of things. What was your experience that these questions, at least from what you've seen a little bit now, does this make sense to you?
Yeah, it does, and that's sort of like the background for my questions too. Is how can we facilitate this so that at least everyone's coming in with or answering it with the same background. I think that's been my experience with dealing with facilitating a lot of these.
Yeah. And what we're hoping for, that the future meetings, when people get rolling on this, will be with different utilities reporting how they're doing, reporting what things worked for them, which things didn't work them, help us improve this tool to work for everybody. So it'll be a lot of fun and excitement.
One thing we've learned along the lines of what you're saying is that in the initial conversation that we have with you, one of the things we would be emphasizing is the importance of having a utility project manager or facilitator who is really capable of navigating this, as well as somebody who's familiar with the tools that so that and what we found in Kansas City was really a combination of a couple people is what the approach they're using to basically make sure that they're ready for this and that they are going to be able to manage it.
Actually, on
Yeah.
that, how do you feel that process is established? I know, you both are very familiar with this. You've built it and everything. To get this handed over, is there a process for that, or is it going through that guidance document that you pull together?
No, I think we definitely can support people and help understand, and and make adjustments to clarify it. It's like although it's in Excel, it's basically close to being an application, and their application as such, it will go through modifications, versions, improvements, and so forth. So we don't expect that 2 years from now it will look something like this. The reason why we chose Excel as the foundation is because other tools such as Power BI easily bolt on to Excel, and Excel has its own analytical capabilities that we can leverage, and everybody's familiar with it. The one exception is the people, survey, the workforce and organizational culture, which is in Microsoft Forms, which is really about keeping things which are individual responses to about how people feel. And that's a little bit different animal than sitting around the table and say, well, how do we determine what's the condition of this pump? That question doesn't evoke the same kind of emotional range of responses as, are you happy in your workplace? So the approach is a little different. We also found that initially transferring tools that are a combination of using BI to business intelligence tools like Power BI is a little bit more of a bigger step for utility. And everybody knows how to use Excel. And if we do it in a clean way and have good documents, it'll be probably easier to support in the future and maintain and stuff like that. So there's been a bit of thought that went into it.
Confidentiality was an issue that we wanted to maintain in the survey and the Power BI and all of that. So, which is different than this, which is assumed to be a workshop type of an approach.
Yeah, nobody's going to have a nervous breakdown or suffer because, you know, of some pump having a problem. So, well, most people would not. So anyway, that's where we are right now, and we're looking forward to these individual discussions, which I think will be where we're going to come to where the rubber meets the road. Any other thoughts before we close up? I want to give a chance for people who haven't voiced their questions or concerns yet. Okay, please contact us if you have any questions. And we're very excited about doing this work. It'll be a lot of fun too. So we're looking forward to that, and wish everybody a great week, and we'll stay in touch. I'm going to turn off the recording.